The crimson sun cast long shadows across the dusty main street of Wyatt, Arizona territory, when Genevieve Morrison's scream pierced the evening air like a bullet through tin. She was pinned against the rough wall of the general store, her husband's face contorted with rage as his hand pulled back for another strike. It was 1887, and in Wyatt, a town that had sprouted around silver mines and cattle trade, such domestic scenes weren't uncommon. What was uncommon was for anyone to intervene. "I only asked him where to find lamp oil," Genevieve gasped, tasting blood from her split lip. Her honey-brown hair had come loose from its carefully arranged knot, and tears streaked through the dust on her cheeks. At 22, she'd endured 3 years of marriage to Howard Morrison, a man whose charm had evaporated the moment the preacher pronounced them husband and wife. "You were smiling at him, weren't you? Batting those pretty eyelashes like the little harlot you are," Howard snarled, his whiskey breath hot against her face as his fingers dug into her shoulders. "Please, Howard." "Not here, not again," she begged, aware of the few townsfolk hurrying past, averting their eyes from what they considered a private matter between man and wife. Howard's response was to raise his fist higher. "I'll teach you to respect," his words cut short as a powerful hand clamped around his wrist mid-swing. Howard twisted, rage giving way to surprise as he found himself staring up at a tall figure silhouetted against the setting sun. "That's no way to treat a lady," came a deep, steady voice. The stranger stepped forward, revealing a face weathered by sun and wind, eyes as blue as a mountain lake, and a day's worth of stubble on a strong jawline. He wore a dust-covered Stetson, trail-worn clothes, and gun belt that had seen its share of use. "Mind your own business, cowboy," Howard spat, trying to wrench his arm free. The cowboy's grip only tightened. "When a man hits a woman in the middle of the street, he makes it everybody's business," the stranger replied, forcing Howard's arm down. "Now, how about you go cool your temper somewhere else?" Howard's gaze flicked to the Colt revolver on the stranger's hip. He was a bully, not a gunfighter. "This ain't over," he muttered, first to the cowboy, then with a sharper glare at Genevieve. "You hear me, woman? This ain't over." He stalked away, shouldering roughly past a young boy who had stopped to watch the confrontation. Genevieve sagged against the wall, clutching her shawl tightly around herself as if it might shield her from the shame of the public spectacle. She could feel the stares now, no longer averted, as townsfolk whispered behind hands and storekeepers paused in their doorways. The cowboy removed his hat, revealing thick dark hair that curled slightly at the nape of his neck. "Are you all right, madam?" "I'm fine," she answered automatically, though the trembling in her voice betrayed her. She touched her bleeding lip gingerly. "You don't look fine," he said gently, pulling a clean handkerchief from his pocket and offering it to her. "My name's Nathan Adler. Just rode into town." Genevieve hesitated before accepting the handkerchief. "Genevieve Morrison. Thank you for your intervention, Mr. Adler, but I should go. My husband will only be worse if I'm not home when he returns." Nathan frowned, studying the bruise already forming on her cheek. "Madam, I don't mean to overstep, but it doesn't seem safe for you to return there tonight." "I don't have anywhere else to go," she admitted, the weight of her situation crushing down on her shoulders. In 3 years, Howard had systematically isolated her from the few friends she'd made in Wyatt. Her parents were back east, believing her to be living a prosperous life with her merchant husband. The truth was far grimmer. Howard's business was failing, his drinking was worsening, and his temper had become increasingly violent. Nathan seemed to consider something. "Mrs. Morrison, I've taken a job at the Circle S Ranch outside town. The owner, Samuel Stark, and his wife are good people. They've hired me to help drive their cattle to market next month, but in the meantime, they've got a cabin on their property where you could stay, at least for tonight, until things settle." "I couldn't possibly." "You can, and you should," he insisted, his voice firm but kind. "No woman deserves to be treated that way. I'll take you there myself and explain the situation to the Starks." Genevieve looked down the street toward the small house she shared with Howard. The thought of returning there, of facing his renewed anger, made her stomach clench with fear. But leaving that was something she'd never dared to contemplate seriously. What would people think? Where would she go? Yet here was this stranger, offering her safety. A moment of respite, at least. "My things," she said weakly. "I have nothing with me." We can send someone for what you need tomorrow, when your husband's likely to be at his store. Nathan offered his arm. My horse is tied up at the livery. If you're willing, we can leave right now. Genevieve took a deep breath. The prospect of escaping, even temporarily, was both terrifying and exhilarating. She knew the risk Howard would be furious. The town would talk. But the alternative was to walk back into that house and face whatever punishment he deemed appropriate for her imagined transgression. All right, she said finally, straightening her shoulders. Just for tonight. Nathan nodded approvingly and guided her toward the livery stable. It's about 5 miles to the Circle S. We can make it before dark if we ride now. As they walked, Genevieve felt the weight of stares following them. Mrs. Hollister, the banker's wife, watched open-mouthed from the millinery shop. Tom Baker, who ran the telegraph office, stood frozen with a message in his hand. Everyone would know by morning that Genevieve Morrison had left town with a cowboy stranger. At the livery, Nathan's horse, a magnificent chestnut gelding, whickered softly as they approached. This is Rusty, Nathan said, stroking the horse's neck. He's strong enough to carry us both to the ranch. With practiced ease, Nathan mounted and then extended his hand to help Genevieve up behind him. She hesitated only briefly before taking his hand, allowing him to pull her up. It had been years since she'd ridden, and never astride like this. Awkwardly, she arranged her skirts as best she could and tentatively placed her hands at Nathan's sides. You'll want to hold tighter than that, he advised. Rusty's got a smooth gait, but it's still a fair distance. Reluctantly, Genevieve slid her arms around Nathan's waist, acutely aware of the impropriety of the situation. But as they rode out of town, the buildings growing smaller behind them, she felt something unexpected: relief. For the first time in 3 years, she was moving away from Howard instead of toward him. The desert landscape opened before them, painted in hues of gold and amber by the setting sun. Saguaro cacti stood like sentinels against the twilight sky, and in the distance, the jagged silhouette of mountains promised a world beyond the confines of her troubled marriage. You're not from Arizona originally, are you, Mrs. Morrison? Nathan asked over his shoulder as they rode. No, she replied, finding it easier to speak now that they were away from town. I'm from Philadelphia. I met Howard when he came east to secure suppliers for his mercantile. He painted such a romantic picture of the West. She gave a humorless laugh. I was 19 and naive enough to believe it all. The West has its own kind of beauty, Nathan said thoughtfully, but it's a hard life, especially for women. Takes a special kind of strength to thrive here. I thought I was strong, Genevieve murmured, almost to herself. Before I married Howard, I taught at a girls' school. I had dreams of opening my own school someday. You still could, Nathan suggested, guiding Rusty around a patch of cholla cactus. Genevieve didn't respond. Dreams seemed like luxuries she could no longer afford. As the light faded from the sky, the Circle S ranch appeared on the horizon, a sprawling property with a main house, several outbuildings, a large barn, and corrals filled with cattle. A lantern glowed in the main house window, a beacon in the gathering dusk. They rode up to the house, and Nathan dismounted before helping Genevieve down. Her legs felt unsteady after the long ride, and she swayed slightly, grateful for Nathan's steadying hand at her elbow. The door opened before they reached it, and a woman in her 50s appeared, her silver-streaked hair pulled back in a practical bun. Nathan? Didn't expect you back till morning. Who's this you've brought with you? Evening, Mrs. Stark, Nathan said, removing his hat. This is Mrs. Genevieve Morrison from town. She's in need of a safe place to stay tonight. I thought perhaps the old foreman's cabin might do, if you and Mr. Stark agree. Mrs. Stark's keen eyes took in Genevieve's disheveled appearance, the bruise on her cheek, and the dried blood on her lip. Understanding dawned in her expression. Come in, both of you. Samuel's just sitting down to supper. The interior of the ranch house was warm and welcoming, with simple but sturdy furniture and colorful quilts adorning the walls. Samuel Stark, a barrel-chested man with a thick gray beard, sat at a large oak table laden with food. What's this? He asked, rising as they entered. Mrs. Stark quickly explained the situation while Genevieve stood uncomfortably in the doorway, feeling like an intruder on this family's evening. Samuel's expression darkened. Morrison, eh? The mercantile owner? Always thought he had a mean look about him. He turned to Genevieve. You're welcome here, Mrs. Morrison. No man has the right to raise his hand to a woman, wife or not. Thank you, Genevieve said, tears threatening again at the unexpected kindness. I don't want to impose. Nonsense, Mrs. Stark interrupted briskly. You'll stay in the cabin, as Nathan suggested. It's small but clean. First, though, you'll eat something. You look half-starved. Despite her protests, Genevieve found herself seated at the table, a plate of hearty beef stew and fresh bread before her. Nathan sat across from her, his presence somehow reassuring. As they ate, Samuel Stark explained that the Circle S was one of the larger cattle operations in the territory. Been running it for 20 years now, ever since we came out from Kansas. Built it up from nothing, Maggie and I. Nathan says you're a schoolteacher, Maggie Stark said, refilling Genevieve's water glass. I was, before I married, Genevieve clarified. In Philadelphia. Well now, isn't that something? Samuel said thoughtfully. We've got 6 ranch hands with families living on the property, and between them, 12 children with no proper schooling. Nearest school's in Wyatt, too far for daily travel. Maggie nodded eagerly. We've been saying for years we ought to set up a small schoolhouse. The old bunkhouse would serve well enough with some fixing up. Genevieve looked between them, uncertain if they were suggesting what she thought they were. Are you offering me employment? Samuel and Maggie exchanged a glance. We might be, Samuel said carefully, depending on how things stand with your situation in town. A woman has certain obligations to her husband under the law, but he trailed off, clearly uncomfortable with the topic. What Mr. Stark means, Nathan interjected, is that if you were to need a more permanent arrangement, there could be a place for you here. Your skills would be valued. Genevieve felt dizzy at the possibility. Leave Howard permanently? The thought was both liberating and terrifying. I don't know what to say. This is all happening so quickly. Nothing needs to be decided tonight, Maggie assured her. For now, you need rest. Nathan can show you to the cabin after supper. The meal continued with talk of cattle prices and upcoming roundups, ordinary conversation that felt extraordinary to Genevieve after years of tense, silent meals with Howard or his drunken tirades. After supper, Nathan walked her to the small cabin about 100 yards from the main house. It was a simple one-room structure with a bed, table, 2 chairs, a small stove, and a washstand. It's not much, Nathan said, lighting the lamp on the table, but it's clean and secure. The door has a good lock. Genevieve looked around, noting the neatly made bed with its patchwork quilt and the small vase of wildflowers on the table. Mrs. Stark must have prepared it while we were eating. Nathan nodded. She's like that, sees what needs doing and does it without fuss. He hesitated at the door. I'll be staying in the bunkhouse with the other hands, but if you need anything, the main house isn't far. Just give a shout, and someone will hear. Thank you, Mr. Adler, Genevieve said softly. I don't know why you chose to help me, but I'm grateful. A shadow crossed his face. Let's just say I've seen what happens when no one steps in. He settled his hat back on his head. Get some rest, Mrs. Morrison. Things often look clearer in the morning light. After he left, Genevieve sat on the edge of the bed, the events of the day washing over her. She touched her bruised cheek, then looked around at the small, peaceful cabin. For the first time in years, she felt safe. She knew this respite wouldn't last. Tomorrow would bring difficult decisions and consequences. Howard wouldn't let her go easily of that. She was certain. But for tonight, she could breathe freely. She lay down on the bed fully clothed, too exhausted to worry about propriety, and fell into the deepest sleep she'd known in years. Dawn broke over the Circle S ranch with a brilliant display of colors that painted the desert landscape in hues of pink and gold. Genevieve woke to unfamiliar silence, no Howard stumbling about, no demands for breakfast to be on the table. For a moment, she lay still, savoring the peace before remembering where she was and why. A soft knock at the cabin door made her sit up quickly, smoothing her rumpled dress and attempting to tidy her loose hair. Mrs. Morrison, it's Maggie Stark. I've brought some things you might need. Genevieve opened the door to find the older woman holding a bundle of clothing and a tray with coffee and biscuits. Good morning, Mrs. Stark. This is very kind of you. Call me Maggie, please. And it's no trouble at all. She set the tray on the table and laid the clothing on the bed. These are some of my daughter's things. She's married and living in Tucson now, but she left some dresses behind. You look to be about her size. Genevieve fingered the simple calico dress gratefully. I can't thank you enough. There's soap and a towel there too. The wash house is just behind the main house, has a proper bath if you'd like one. No one will disturb you this early. Maggie paused, studying Genevieve's face with motherly concern. That's quite a bruise. I've made a poultice that might help. After Maggie left, Genevieve ate the simple breakfast and changed into the borrowed dress, relieved to be out of her soiled clothing. The dress was simpler than what she usually wore practical ranch, where rather than the more fashionable attire Howard insisted upon for the merchant's wife, but it was clean and comfortable. She made her way to the wash house and luxuriated in a proper bath, washing away the dust and fear of the previous day. By the time she emerged, the ranch was fully awake. Cowboys moved between corrals. The smell of cooking fires filled the air, and children's laughter echoed from somewhere nearby. Nathan was by the main corral, brushing down Rusty. He looked up as she approached, and something in his expression made her heart beat faster. In the clear morning light, she could see him properly for the first time, tall and broad-shouldered, with those striking blue eyes set in a face that was handsome despite, or perhaps because of, its weathered character. His dark hair curled slightly where it met his collar, and when he smiled at her, she noticed a small dimple in his right cheek. "Good morning, Mrs. Morrison," he said, setting down the brush. "You look rested." "I feel better than I have in a long time," she admitted. "Though I'm not sure what happens next." Nathan leaned against the corral fence. "That depends on what you want to happen next." Before Genevieve could respond, the sound of approaching hoofbeats drew their attention. A rider was coming fast down the road to the ranch, raising a cloud of dust behind him. "That's Tom Baker from the telegraph office," Nathan said, straightening up with a frown. Baker reined in his horse sharply as he reached them. "Mrs. Morrison," he said, breathing hard, "you'd better come back to town. Your husband's tearing the place apart looking for you. He's at the sheriff's office now, talking about pressing charges against Adler here for abduction." Genevieve felt the color drain from her face. "That's absurd. I came willingly." "Maybe so, but Morrison's saying different. Says Adler threatened him and forced you to leave." Baker shifted uncomfortably in his saddle. "Sheriff says he can't ignore a complaint from a respectable businessman, especially when it involves a man's wife." Nathan's jaw tightened. "I'll ride back with her. We'll sort this out." "No," Genevieve said quickly. "If you come into town, Howard will only use it as proof of his accusations. I need to handle this myself." "You can't face him alone," Nathan argued. "After what he did to you yesterday, he won't hit me in the sheriff's office," she said with more confidence than she felt. "And I need to make it clear that I left of my own accord." She turned to Tom Baker. "Please tell Sheriff Preston I'll be there within the hour." After Baker rode off, Nathan looked at her with concern. "This isn't right. Morrison should be the one answering questions, not you." "Welcome to the reality of being a woman in this world, Mr. Adler," Genevieve replied with a bitterness that surprised even her. "The law gives a husband considerable authority over his wife. The law doesn't give him the right to beat you. In practice, it often does." She sighed, squaring her shoulders. "I need to borrow a horse." Samuel Stark, who had joined them during the conversation, nodded. "Take the bay mare. She's gentle but sure-footed. I'll have one of the boys saddle her for you." As they waited, Nathan stepped closer to Genevieve. "What will you do? Will you go back to him?" It was the question she'd been asking herself all night. "I don't know," she admitted. "Legally, I have few options. My money is his. This property is his. Even if I wanted to leave permanently, where would I go? How would I support myself?" "You could stay here," Nathan said. The Starks meant what they said about needing a teacher. Genevieve looked at him curiously. "Why do you care so much, Mr. Adler?" "You don't know me." Nathan's expression darkened. "My sister was married to a man like your husband. No one helped her. One night, he went too far." He didn't need to finish the sentence. Genevieve understood. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "It was 5 years ago, back in Colorado." His voice was flat. "Since then, I don't stand by when I see a woman in danger. I can't." A ranch hand brought the saddled bay mare around, interrupting their conversation. Samuel Stark handed Genevieve a small pouch. "Some money, in case you need it. Not much, but enough for a stage ticket if things go poorly." Touched by the gesture, Genevieve mounted the horse, adjusting her borrowed dress around her legs. Thank you both. I'll return the horse as soon as I can. Just take care of yourself, Nathan said, his hand resting briefly on her knee. And remember, you have a place here if you need it. The ride to Wyatt gave Genevieve time to think. 3 years of her life had been spent with Howard, watching as the charming man she'd married transformed into someone she feared. She'd told herself it was temporary, that the business troubles and drinking would pass, that the Howard she'd fallen for would return. But yesterday, when he'd struck her in public without shame, something had broken inside her. Not just her spirit, but her willingness to endure. The town was unusually busy when she arrived, word having spread about the drama unfolding. Genevieve rode directly to the sheriff's office, ignoring the stares and whispers that followed her. She tied the bay mare to the hitching post and took a deep breath before entering. Sheriff Preston's office was small and functional, with a desk, 2 chairs, and 2 cells at the back, currently empty. Howard sat in one of the chairs, while Sheriff Preston leaned against his desk. Both men looked up as she entered. Genevieve. Howard rose, his expression a calculated mix of relief and concern. He moved toward her as if to embrace her, but she stepped back. Thank God you're safe. When you disappeared with that drifter, I feared the worst. Mrs. Morrison, Sheriff Preston nodded to her. Your husband here has been quite concerned. Says this cowboy, Adler, forced you to leave town with him. Genevieve met the sheriff's gaze steadily. That's not true, Sheriff. I left willingly after Mr. Adler prevented my husband from striking me in front of the general store. Howard's face darkened. Now, Genevieve, you're confused. We had a little disagreement, that's all. This stranger interfered in a private matter between husband and wife, threatened me, and then took advantage of your distress. He's lying, Genevieve said firmly. Mr. Adler offered me safe shelter for the night at the Circle S ranch because my husband had already hit me once and was preparing to do so again. Sheriff Preston looked uncomfortable. At 50, he'd been sheriff of Wyatt for over a decade, and domestic disputes were his least favorite part of the job. Mrs. Morrison, these are serious accusations. Are you saying your husband struck you? Yes. She touched her cheek, where the bruise was still visible despite Maggie's poultice. This isn't the first time either. Howard's face reddened with anger, but he controlled himself in the sheriff's presence. My wife has always been prone to dramatizing situations. She's delicate, emotional. I may have grabbed her arm during our disagreement, but I would never strike her. As for that bruise, how do I know what happened after she rode off with that cowboy? Sheriff Preston sighed heavily. Mrs. Morrison, I understand you may have been upset, but leaving town with a stranger was dangerous and reckless. Your husband was within his rights to be concerned. What about my right not to be beaten? Genevieve countered, anger giving her courage. Is there no law against a man striking his wife? The sheriff shifted uncomfortably. Well, the law does give a husband certain authority in managing his household, but excessive force is generally frowned upon. Frowned upon, Genevieve repeated bitterly. Not illegal, just frowned upon. Now, Genevieve, Howard said, his tone conciliatory but his eyes hard. You're tired and confused. Let's go home and discuss this privately. The thought of returning to that house, of being alone with Howard when his false concern gave way to rage, made Genevieve's blood run cold. I'm not going home with you, Howard. His smile froze. Don't be ridiculous. Of course you are. You're my wife. A wife, not a possession, she replied, finding strength in the words. I'm staying at the Circle S ranch for now. The Starks have offered me a position teaching the ranch children. Howard's face contorted with fury. You're not staying anywhere but our home. Sheriff, she's my wife. Tell her she has to come home with me. Sheriff Preston looked between them, clearly wishing he were elsewhere. Mrs. Morrison, while I can't force you to return home, I should point out that legally, your husband has considerable say in where you reside and how you're employed. If he were to insist, are you saying you would physically force me to go with him? Genevieve asked incredulously. Not personally, no, the sheriff hedged. But the court might take a different view if Mr. Morrison were to file a formal complaint. Howard smiled triumphantly. You see, Genevieve, you're making a spectacle of yourself for nothing. Now, come home, and we'll forget this unfortunate incident. Genevieve stood her ground. I need time to think, Howard. I'll be staying at the Circle S for at least a few days. And if I don't permit it, Howard challenged. Then file your complaint with the court, she replied, surprising herself with her steadiness. In the meantime, I believe I'm entitled to collect some of my personal belongings from the house. Howard's jaw worked as he considered his options. A court proceeding would be public, potentially embarrassing, and not guaranteed to go his way if Genevieve spoke of his violent behavior. Fine. A few days. But I expect you back by Sunday, ready to take your proper place as my wife. Sheriff Preston looked relieved at this temporary resolution. Mr. Morrison, why don't you return to your store? I'll escort Mrs. Morrison to collect her things and ensure she leaves town safely. After Howard left, his stride stiff with suppressed anger, Sheriff Preston regarded Genevieve thoughtfully. Mrs. Morrison, a word of advice? Whatever you decide, tread carefully. Morrison has influence in this town, and not everyone will be sympathetic to a wife who publicly defies her husband. Is that how you see it, Sheriff? Defiance rather than self-preservation. The older man sighed. What I see doesn't matter much. It's what the law sees. And the law, for better or worse, gives a husband considerable authority. The law also says murder is wrong, Genevieve said quietly, which is what might happen if I continue living with a man whose temper grows more violent by the day. Sheriff Preston had no response to that. The visit to her house was brief and tense. Howard had not returned there, staying at his store instead, but his presence lingered in every corner of the small home they'd shared. Genevieve packed quickly a few dresses, undergarments, her mother's locket, a cherished book of poetry, and the small amount of money she'd managed to set aside in secret over the years. It wasn't much, but it represented possibility. As she rode back to the Circle S with the sheriff alongside her, Genevieve felt strangely light. The future remained uncertain, fraught with legal and social complications. But for the moment, she had chosen her own path rather than submitting to Howard's will. It was a small victory, but significant. The sheriff left her at the ranch gate, tipping his hat awkwardly before turning back toward town. Nathan and Samuel Stark were waiting for her by the main house. How did it go? Nathan asked, taking the reins of the bay mare as she dismounted. Genevieve explained the conversation with Howard and the sheriff, concluding, "So I have until Sunday to decide what to do next." Samuel Stark nodded thoughtfully. "Not much time, but enough to consider your options. In the meantime, Maggie set up the old bunkhouse for you to look at. If you're still interested in teaching, that is." The prospect of having purposeful work again lifted Genevieve's spirits. "I'd like that very much, Mr. Stark." As Samuel walked ahead to the bunkhouse, Nathan fell into step beside Genevieve. "You were brave today," he said quietly. Not many would stand up to both their husband and the law. "I'm not sure it was bravery so much as desperation," she admitted. The thought of going back to that house, to that life. She shuddered. "You don't have to go back," Nathan said firmly. "Legally, I may have no choice." "There are always choices," he replied, his gaze intense. "Some are just harder than others." The old bunkhouse stood about 200 yards from the main house, a long, low building that had once housed ranch hands before the individual family cabins were built. Inside, it was spacious but sparse, with dust-covered bunks lining the walls. "It needs work," Samuel acknowledged, "but it could make a fine schoolroom. We could remove most of these bunks, build some proper desks, add a blackboard." Genevieve walked the length of the room, already envisioning it transformed. Sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating motes of dust dancing in the air. "It's perfect," she said. "How many children did you say there were?" 12 now, ranging from 5 to 14. Good kids? All of them, just lacking formal education. Their parents do what they can, but most aren't educated themselves. For the rest of the day, Genevieve threw herself into planning the school. With Maggie's help, she inventoried what supplies they had and what they would need. Samuel assigned 2 ranch hands to begin clearing out the bunkhouse, and by evening, the transformation was already underway. At supper in the main house, the conversation flowed easily around plans for the school, the upcoming cattle drive, and ranch business. Genevieve found herself laughing for the first time in months at a story one of the hands told about a particularly stubborn steer. Nathan, seated across from her, watched her with a warmth that made her both self-conscious and strangely pleased. There was something about him that made her feel seen not as Howard Morrison's wife or as the proper Eastern lady she'd been raised to be, but as herself, Genevieve. After the meal, Nathan walked her back to the cabin. The night was clear, a canopy of stars stretching endlessly above them, more brilliant than she'd ever seen in Philadelphia or even in town. "It's beautiful here," she said, stopping to gaze upward. "So vast and open." Nathan followed her gaze. "That's what I love about it. Makes a person feel small in a good way, like your problems aren't the whole world." "Is that why you became a cowboy? For the open spaces?" He considered the question. "Partly. After my sister died, I couldn't stay in our hometown. Too many memories, too much anger. I headed west, worked ranches in Colorado, New Mexico, and now here. The work suits me, honest labor, mostly solitude, but good company when you want it." "It sounds lonely," Genevieve observed. "It can be," he admitted. "But there's a difference between being alone and being lonely. I've been both." They reached her cabin door, and an awkward silence fell between them. Genevieve was acutely aware that despite the circumstances that had brought her here, she was still a married woman standing alone with a single man in the moonlight. "Thank you again for everything," she said, breaking the silence. "Not just for yesterday, but for today, for believing me when so many others wouldn't." Nathan's expression softened. "You're a strong woman, Mrs. Morrison. Stronger than you realize." "Genevieve," she said impulsively. "Please call me Genevieve." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Genevieve," he repeated, the name sounding different in his deep voice. "Good night, Genevieve. Rest well." As she watched him walk away, Genevieve felt a flutter in her chest that both alarmed and exhilarated her. She was still legally bound to Howard, still facing an uncertain future. This was no time for her heart to be stirring with feelings for another man. And yet, as she prepared for bed in the quiet cabin, she couldn't help but replay the way Nathan had said her name, as if it were something precious. The next 3 days passed in a whirlwind of activity. The bunkhouse transformation progressed rapidly, with bunks removed, floors scrubbed, and simple desks constructed by the ranch carpenter. Maggie drove into town and returned with slates, chalk, a few precious books, and other school supplies. Genevieve met the ranch families and their children, who regarded her with a mixture of curiosity and excitement. Most had never had formal schooling, but their eagerness to learn was palpable. She conducted informal assessments to determine their various levels and began developing lesson plans. Nathan divided his time between ranch work and helping with the school preparations. He built her a desk and chair from pine boards, sanded smooth and polished to a warm glow. "Every teacher needs a proper desk," he said when he presented it to her, and the pride in his eyes made her heart swell. Howard sent no messages, made no attempt to contact her. This worried Genevieve more than if he had come storming out to the ranch. Howard's anger was dangerous, but his calculated silence was worse. She knew he was planning something. On Saturday evening, with only 1 day left before Howard's deadline, Genevieve sat on the porch of her cabin, watching the sunset paint the desert in gold and crimson. The beauty of it still took her breath away, so different from the eastern landscapes she'd grown up with. She heard footsteps and looked up to see Nathan approaching, his tall figure silhouetted against the fiery sky. He carried something in his hands. "Evening," he said, coming up the porch steps. "Thought you might like some company. And pie." Maggie sent pie. Genevieve laughed, gesturing to the empty chair beside her. "I never turned down pie or good company." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, sharing the apple pie directly from the plate Maggie had sent. The sweet, cinnamon-scented dessert tasted like comfort and home. "Tomorrow's Sunday," Nathan finally said, his tone carefully neutral. "Have you decided what you'll do?" Genevieve sighed. "I've been thinking about it constantly. The sensible choice would be to return to Howard, to try to negotiate some kind of peace. Perhaps if I agree to be more compliant, he would be less violent." Nathan's jaw tightened. "That's not peace, Genevieve. That's surrender." "I know," she admitted. "But the alternatives seem impossible. If I refuse to return, Howard could legally compel me. He could claim all my possessions, prevent me from working, even have me forcibly returned to his home. The law is on his side." "What if you weren't in his jurisdiction anymore?" Nathan asked. "What if you went somewhere else, somewhere he couldn't easily reach you?" Genevieve looked at him questioningly. "Like where?" "California, maybe. Or up to Colorado. Somewhere you could start fresh, Use your teaching skills without the shadow of Howard Morrison hanging over you. The idea was tempting, a new beginning in a place where no one knew her as Howard's wife. But the practical challenges seemed insurmountable. I have very little money of my own, and traveling alone as a woman. You wouldn't have to travel alone, Nathan said quietly, his eyes meeting hers in the fading light. I could go with you. The implication hung in the air between them. Genevieve's heart raced. Nathan, I'm still married. Whatever my feelings about Howard, in the eyes of the law, I know, he interrupted gently. I'm not proposing anything improper. I'm offering friendship, protection, a chance to reach somewhere safe. What happens after that would be your decision entirely. Genevieve studied his face, so open and earnest in the twilight. In less than a week, this man had shown her more kindness and respect than Howard had in 3 years of marriage. The connection between them was undeniable, but was it enough to risk everything? It's a generous offer, she said carefully, but I can't ask you to upend your life for me. You have work here, obligations to the Starks. The cattle drive ends in California, Nathan pointed out. I'd be heading there anyway in a few weeks. We could leave tomorrow, before Morrison expects you back. The Starks would understand. The possibility unfurled before her freedom, a new start, Nathan's steady presence beside her on the journey. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. I need to think, she said finally. This isn't a decision to make lightly. Nathan nodded, rising from his chair. Of course, whatever you decide, I'll respect it. He hesitated, then added softly. But know this, Genevieve, in the short time I've known you, I've seen your courage, your kindness, your determination. You deserve a life where those qualities are valued, not punished. After he left, Genevieve remained on the porch long after darkness fell, weighing her options as stars appeared one by one in the vast desert sky. The choice before her was monumental: return to the safety of a known misery or risk everything for an uncertain freedom. She was still sitting there when she heard the sound of an approaching wagon. Squinting into the darkness, she could make out a single horse and buggy coming up the ranch road. Her heart sank as she recognized Howard's bay gelding. Rising quickly, she moved into the shadows of the cabin's porch, watching as the buggy stopped near the main house. Howard climbed down, straightening his coat in a familiar gesture that sent a chill through her. Even at this distance, she could tell by the set of his shoulders that he was angry, though controlling it carefully. Samuel Stark emerged from the house, lantern in hand. The two men spoke briefly, Howard gesturing emphatically while Samuel stood solid as stone. After a few minutes, Samuel pointed toward Genevieve's cabin. Howard nodded and returned to his buggy, turning it in her direction. Genevieve's first instinct was to flee, to run to the bunkhouse or the barn, anywhere to avoid the confrontation. But she forced herself to stay, to face what was coming. Running now would only delay the inevitable. The buggy pulled up before her cabin, and Howard stepped down, looking out of place in his town clothes against the rustic setting. In the dim light from her cabin window, his face was a mask of controlled civility. Genevieve, he said, removing his hat. I've come to take you home. She remained on the porch, one hand gripping the railing. It's not Sunday yet, Howard. Close enough, he replied, climbing the steps to stand before her. I think we've indulged this little adventure of yours long enough, don't you? There was something in his tone that raised her guard, a false pleasantness that barely concealed his anger. I told Sheriff Preston I needed time to think. I'm not ready to return. Howard smiled tightly. I'm afraid you don't have a choice, my dear. You see, I've spoken to Judge Harmon. He's sympathetic to my situation, a respected businessman whose wife has abandoned her duties to live among ranch hands. The judge has issued an order compelling your return. Fear clutched at Genevieve's heart. You can't force me to go with you. Actually, I can. Howard produced a folded paper from his pocket. This document gives me the legal right to reclaim my wife, by force if necessary. Sheriff Preston was reluctant to accompany me tonight, but he acknowledged the validity of the order. If you resist, I'll return with him tomorrow. Genevieve's mind raced. She hadn't expected Howard to move so quickly or to have such legal leverage. May I see the order? Howard handed her the paper. In the dim light, she could make out the official seal and signature. It was indeed a court order, directing her to return to her husband's home and care. This isn't right, she said, her voice shaking. You've misrepresented the situation to Judge Harmon. I told him my wife was acting irrationally, possibly under the influence of a drifter who interfered in our marriage. Howard's voice hardened. Now gather your things. We're leaving tonight. No. The word came out stronger than she expected. I won't go with you, Howard. Not tonight. Not tomorrow. Not ever again. His facade of civility cracked. Don't be stupid, Genevieve. You have no money, no property, no rights apart from me. Where would you go? What would you do? I'll find my way, she said, standing taller. I'm not the frightened girl you married anymore. Howard laughed, a cold sound without humor. No? Let's see how brave you are when you're back home, with no witnesses to interfere. His hand shot out, grabbing her wrist with bruising force. You're my wife, Genevieve. Mine. No court in this territory will say otherwise. She struggled against his grip. Let me go. Is there a problem here? Nathan's voice cut through the darkness. He stood at the bottom of the porch steps, his stance casual, but his eyes alert. Howard's grip tightened painfully on Genevieve's wrist. This is none of your concern, Cowboy. This is between me and my wife. Nathan climbed the steps slowly. When a man grabs a woman against her will on the property where I work, it becomes my concern. I have a court order, Howard snapped, releasing Genevieve to thrust the paper at Nathan. She's legally required to return home with me. Nathan glanced at the document, then at Genevieve. Is that what you want? To go with him? No, she said clearly. I don't want to go with him. Nathan handed the paper back to Howard. There's your answer, Morrison. The lady doesn't want to go with you. Howard's face flushed with anger. The lady doesn't have a choice. She's my wife, bound by law to obey me. And you have no right to interfere. I interfered once when you were about to hit her, Nathan said calmly. I'd do it again. Howard looked between them, sudden understanding dawning in his eyes. So that's how it is, he said, his voice dangerously quiet. My wife has found herself a new man. A common cowboy, no less. It's not like that, Genevieve protested, though her flushed cheeks betrayed her. Isn't it? Howard's gaze hardened. Well, it makes no difference. You're still legally my wife, and I'm taking you home tonight. He reached for her again. Nathan stepped between them. She's not going anywhere she doesn't want to go. The tension between the two men was palpable, like the charged air before a thunderstorm. Howard was shorter than Nathan, but broader, with the solid build of a man used to getting his way through intimidation. Get out of my way, cowboy, Howard growled. Unless you want to face charges of interfering with a lawful court order. I'll take my chances, Nathan replied, not moving. Howard's hand moved to his waistband, and with a shock, Genevieve realized he was carrying a pistol concealed beneath his coat. I said, get out of my way. Nathan noticed it too, but didn't flinch. Drawing that would be a mistake, Morrison. Howard, please. Genevieve pleaded, fear coursing through her. This doesn't need to become violent. I'll come home with you. Just put the gun away. Genevieve, no, Nathan said, not taking his eyes off Howard. Howard smiled triumphantly. You see? She knows where she belongs. His hand moved away from the concealed weapon. Come, Genevieve. The buggy's waiting. She stepped forward reluctantly, her eyes meeting Nathan's with silent apology. She couldn't bear to be responsible for violence or for legal troubles that might come his way if she refused. As she moved past Nathan, his hand caught hers briefly. You don't have to do this, he murmured. Yes, I do, she whispered back. For now. Howard took her arm possessively, his fingers digging into her flesh. Get your things. We're leaving immediately. Allow me to get my bag, she said, pulling away to enter the cabin. Once inside, she moved quickly, stuffing her few belongings into the small carpet bag she'd brought from town. Her mind worked frantically, searching for options, for some way out of this trap. Through the window, she could see Nathan and Howard on the porch, tension evident in their stances. Howard was speaking, his expression smug, while Nathan stood rigid, his hands clenched at his sides. As she packed, Genevieve's hand fell on the small purse Samuel Stark had given her the money for a stage ticket if things go poorly. An idea began to form. Perhaps returning with Howard tonight was inevitable, but it didn't have to be permanent. She tucked the money into her bodice, where Howard wouldn't think to look for it, and gathered her remaining possessions. Taking a deep breath, she rejoined the men on the porch. I'm ready, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. Howard took her bag, his smile triumphant. Good. Let's go home, wife. As they walked to the buggy, Nathan followed a few paces behind. This isn't over, Morrison, he called. A court order won't change the fact that you're a man who hits women. Howard ignored him, helping Genevieve into the buggy with exaggerated courtesy that fooled neither of them. As they drove away from the Circle S, Genevieve looked back to see Nathan standing in the road, a solitary figure watching them disappear into the night. The ride to town was tense and silent. Howard drove with tight-lipped anger, and Genevieve sat as far from him as the buggy seat allowed, preparing herself for what would come when they reached home. You've embarrassed me, Howard finally said as the lights of Wyatt came into view. Made me a laughingstock. The merchant whose wife ran off with a cowboy. I didn't run off with him, Genevieve replied. I left because you hit me, publicly and without provocation. You were flirting with that drummer right in front of me. I asked him where to find lamp oil. Howard, that's hardly flirting. He snorted in disbelief. You've always been too familiar with other men. Too quick to smile, to engage in conversation. It's disrespectful. Genevieve stared at him, truly seeing the smallness of the man she'd married. No, Howard. What's disrespectful is treating your wife like a possession instead of a partner. His hands tightened on the reins. You'll learn your place when we get home. The threat hung between them as they pulled up to their house at the edge of town. It was just as Genevieve had left it, a modest frame house that had once seemed full of promise, but now felt like a prison. Howard grabbed her arm as soon as they entered, shoving her against the wall. Now, wife, we're going to establish some new rules in this household. Genevieve steeled herself, determined not to show fear. Howard, think about what you're doing. Hitting me again will only prove everything I've said about you. His hand drew back, but then he seemed to reconsider, lowering it slowly. You think you're clever, don't you? But I'm not a fool. I know you've developed feelings for that cowboy. This isn't about Nathan, she said, though her heart quickened at speaking his name. It's about how you treat me. Howard laughed harshly. Nathan, is it? So familiar already. He released her arm, moving to pour himself a generous glass of whiskey. Well, your precious Nathan won't be around much longer. I've written to the marshal in Silver City about him. Seems there was a warrant issued there last year for a cowboy matching his description. Something about a brawl that left a man dead. Genevieve's blood ran cold. You're lying. Am I? Howard smiled over his glass. We'll find out when the marshal arrives, won't we? I expect he'll be here within the week. You're trying to frighten me, she said, though doubt crept into her mind. She knew so little about Nathan's past. Think what you like. Howard drained his whiskey and set down the glass with deliberate care. In the meantime, you will resume your duties as my wife. You will not leave this house without my permission. You will not speak to other men. And you will certainly never return to that ranch. He crossed to where she stood and touched her bruised cheek with deceptive gentleness. You're mine, Genevieve. The sooner you accept that, the easier things will be for both of us. She turned her face away from his touch. And if I don't accept it? His expression hardened. Then I'll make sure your cowboy pays the price for interfering. Guilty or not, a man can meet with accidents in this territory. Especially a man with no family, no connections. The threat against Nathan was worse than any physical blow Howard could have delivered. Genevieve felt sick with the realization that her attempt to escape had only put Nathan in danger. Now, Howard said, apparently satisfied that his message had been received. Get yourself cleaned up and prepare my supper. We've had quite enough drama for one day. He left her standing there, moving to his chair by the fireplace with the whiskey bottle. Genevieve went through the motions of preparing a simple meal, her mind working feverishly. If what Howard said about a warrant was true, Nathan needed to be warned. If it wasn't, he still needed to know about Howard's threats. Either way, she couldn't stay here, not permanently. Howard's control and violence would only escalate after this challenge to his authority. She needed to plan a way to escape that wouldn't endanger Nathan or herself. As she served Howard his supper, watching him eat with the smug satisfaction of a man who believes he's won, Genevieve made a silent vow. This time, her escape would be permanent. She just needed patience, caution, and the right moment to act. The next few days settled into an uneasy routine. Howard kept Genevieve under close watch, accompanying her to church on Sunday where she endured the whispers and stares of the townspeople, escorting her to and from the mercantile, where she was expected to work beside him, keeping her within sight at all times. At night, she lay rigid beside him in their bed, enduring his husbandly rights with a detachment that was her only form of resistance. Inside, she was calculating, planning, watching for any opportunity. Howard had confiscated her few remaining possessions, but he hadn't discovered the money hidden in her corset. Each night, she relocated it to a new hiding place, ensuring it would be accessible when the time came. On Wednesday, Howard was called to a meeting with other merchants to discuss a proposed railroad spur that might bring more business to Wyatt. It would be his first extended absence since bringing her home. "You will remain here," he instructed her, buttoning his vest. "I've asked Mrs. Perkins next door to check on you periodically. Do not disappoint me, Genevieve." As soon as he left, Genevieve sprang into action. She knew Mrs. Perkins wouldn't come by for at least an hour. The older woman had a standing appointment with her sewing circle on Wednesday mornings. Quickly, Genevieve wrote 2 notes. The first was addressed to Nathan, warning him about Howard's claim regarding a warrant and his threats. The second was to Maggie Stark, thanking her for her kindness and explaining that Genevieve would not be returning to teach the ranch children as planned. She had just sealed the notes when she heard the back door open. Spinning around, she expected to see Mrs. Perkins making an unexpectedly early visit. Instead, Nathan stood in her kitchen, hat in hand, his expression a mix of determination and concern. "Nathan," she gasped, "what are you doing here? If Howard finds you, I had to see that you were all right," he said, stepping closer to examine her face. His eyes darkened at the sight of new bruises on her wrists. "Has he hurt you again?" "Not as badly as he could have," she admitted. "Nathan, you shouldn't be here. Howard has threatened you. He claims there's a warrant for your arrest in Silver City, something about a brawl." Nathan's expression shifted, a shadow crossing his features. "There was a fight, but no warrant. A man drew on me after losing at cards. I defended myself. He lived, though not without injury." Relief flooded through Genevieve. So Howard was lying. About the warrant, yes. But a man like Morrison could create trouble regardless. Nathan glanced around the kitchen. "I've come to ask if you want to leave. For good this time." Genevieve's heart leapt. "Yes," she said without hesitation. "I was just writing to warn you. I've been planning to escape, but I didn't know how to reach you safely." The Starks suspected Morrison wouldn't let you stay at the ranch peacefully. Samuel rode to the telegraph office in Carlton yesterday and sent messages inquiring about divorce laws in neighboring territories. Nathan took her hands gently. "Genevieve, in Colorado, a woman can divorce her husband on grounds of cruelty. With witnesses like the Starks and myself, you'd have a case." Hope, fragile and tentative, began to bloom in Genevieve's chest. "Colorado? That's where you're from." "My brother has a ranch outside Denver," Nathan confirmed. "You'd be welcome there while the legal proceedings run their course. After that, well, you'd be free to make your own choices." The possibility of legal freedom from Howard was almost too much to comprehend. "When could we leave?" "Now," Nathan said simply. "I have horses waiting behind the livery. We can be miles from Wyatt before Morrison returns from his meeting." Genevieve hesitated only briefly. "I need 5 minutes to gather a few things. Things he won't notice missing right away." While Nathan kept watch at the window, Genevieve moved quickly through the house. She collected the hidden money, a change of undergarments, a small photograph of her parents, and the wedding ring her mother had worn, the one family heirloom Howard had allowed her to keep. She changed into her sturdiest dress, suitable for riding, and pinned her hair up securely under a plain bonnet. Looking around the bedroom one last time, she felt no regret, only a desperate eagerness to be gone. When she returned to the kitchen, Nathan handed her a bundle. "Maggie sent these. Riding clothes, more practical than a dress for where we're going." The bundle contained men's trousers, a shirt, and a jacket that would allow her to ride astride without scandal. Genevieve ducked behind a screen to change, emerging feeling strangely liberated in the unfamiliar garments. "Ready?" Nathan asked, offering his hand. Genevieve took it without hesitation. "Ready." They slipped out the back door and through the neighbors' yards, avoiding the main street where they might be recognized. The livery stable stood at the edge of town, and behind it, as Nathan had promised, 2 horses waited, his chestnut gelding, Rusty, and a dappled gray mare. The mare is gentle but has good endurance, Nathan explained as he helped Genevieve mount. We'll ride north out of town, then cut east toward the territorial border. I know trails the law won't follow easily. As they rode away from Wyatt, keeping to back roads and dry washes to avoid being seen, Genevieve felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. The future remained uncertain, fraught with legal and practical challenges, but for the first time in years, she was choosing her own path. They rode hard through the day, stopping only briefly to rest the horses and eat the provisions Maggie had packed. Nathan kept them to hidden trails, avoiding the main roads where Howard might send searchers. By nightfall, they had covered nearly 30 miles, reaching a small line cabin that belonged to a rancher friendly with the Starks. We can rest here tonight, Nathan explained. Tomorrow we'll push on to the stage stop at Coyote Springs. From there, we can take the stage to Flagstaff, then the train east to Colorado. The cabin was a single room with a stone fireplace, rough-hewn table and chairs, and a narrow cot. Nathan built a fire while Genevieve prepared a simple meal from their provisions. As they ate by firelight, the reality of their situation began to sink in. Genevieve had left behind everything familiar, fled with a man she'd known for barely a week, and was now officially a runaway wife, possibly even considered kidnapped in the eyes of the law. Are you having second thoughts? Nathan asked, noting her pensive expression. No, she said truthfully. I'm just adjusting to how quickly everything has changed. A week ago, I was resigned to my life with Howard. Now I'm wearing trousers and fleeing across the territory with a cowboy I barely know. Nathan smiled slightly. When you put it that way, it does sound rather dramatic. I don't even know your full story, Genevieve pointed out. You know about my marriage, my teaching, but all I really know about you is that you had a sister who died and you work as a cowboy. Fair enough, Nathan acknowledged. What would you like to know? Everything, she said simply. If we're trusting each other with our lives, I want to know who you are. Nathan leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful in the flickering firelight. I was born in St. Louis, but my family moved to Colorado when I was 10. My father was a blacksmith, taught me the trade, but I was never as skilled as he was. I preferred working with horses, being outdoors. He spoke of growing up with his younger sister, Elizabeth, of his parents' deaths from influenza when he was 20, of taking responsibility for Beth afterward. She married too young, I thought, but she was headstrong. Her husband seemed decent at first, but after they moved to his hometown, things changed. By the time I realized how bad it had gotten, it was too late. The pain in his voice was still raw, even 5 years later. After Beth died, I confronted her husband. It got physical. He pulled a knife. I defended myself. He lived, but people in town took his side. He was from a prominent family, and I was just the outsider brother-in-law causing trouble. So you left? Genevieve said softly. Nathan nodded. Drifted for a while, working ranches, taking whatever jobs came along. Learned to keep to myself, not get involved in other people's business. His eyes met hers. Until I saw a man about to hit his wife in front of the general store in Wyatt. The weight of what he'd done for her, risking the stable life he'd built at the Circle S, potentially facing legal repercussions, settled over Genevieve. Why did you help me? Really? At first, because I couldn't walk away, he admitted. Not after Beth. But then. He paused, choosing his words carefully. Then I got to know you. Your courage, your kindness, the way you light up when you talk about teaching. I've never met anyone like you, Genevieve. The intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. There was more than admiration there, more than friendship or compassion. Nathan, she began, uncertain what she wanted to say. She was still married, still bound by vows she had taken, even if Howard had violated the spirit of those vows repeatedly. He seemed to understand her conflict. I know your situation, Genevieve. I'm not asking for anything you can't give. But I want you to know that whatever happens when we reach Colorado, whether you decide to stay or go elsewhere once you're free, I'll respect your choice. And if I choose to stay? The question slipped out before she could consider its implications. Nathan's expression softened. Then I'd be the most fortunate man in the Colorado territory. The moment hung between them, charged with possibility. Genevieve was acutely aware of the impropriety of their situation alone in this cabin, miles from anywhere, with feelings blossoming that had no right to exist while she remained Howard's wife. We should get some rest, she said finally, breaking the tension. We have a long ride tomorrow. You take the cot, Nathan said, rising to arrange his bedroll near the fire. I'll be comfortable enough here. As Genevieve lay on the narrow cot, listening to the crackling fire and Nathan's steady breathing, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. 1 week ago, she had been trapped in a life of fear and submission. Now she was racing toward an uncertain but hopeful future with a man who treated her with respect and kindness, a man who made her heart race in a way Howard never had. Whatever complications lay ahead, she knew with certainty that she had made the right choice in leaving. Freedom was worth any risk. Dawn was just breaking when Nathan woke her. We need to move, he said urgently. Riders approaching from the south. Genevieve scrambled up, quickly donning her jacket and hat. Through the cabin's small window, she could see dust rising on the horizon, several riders coming fast. Howard? She asked, fear clutching at her throat. Possible, Nathan replied grimly, checking his revolver before holstering it. Or the sheriff. Either way, we can't stay here. They gathered their belongings quickly, erasing signs of their presence as best they could. Nathan led the horses from the small corral behind the cabin, saddling them with practiced efficiency. We'll head north through the canyon, he said as he helped Genevieve mount. It's rough terrain, but it'll slow them down if they follow. They rode out just as the riders crested the last hill before the cabin. Genevieve glanced back, her heart pounding, and recognized Sheriff Preston's tall figure leading the group. Beside him rode Howard, his face dark with fury even at this distance. They've seen us, she called to Nathan as they urged their horses to a gallop. The chase was on. Nathan led them into a narrow canyon, its walls rising steeply on either side. The path was treacherous, loose shale and occasional boulders forcing them to slow their pace despite the pursuers behind them. There's a fork ahead, Nathan shouted over the thunder of hooves. The left path leads to a box canyon, a dead end. The right continues through to open country. When we reach it, I want you to take Rusty and go right. I'll take the grade down the left path to draw them off. No, Genevieve protested. I won't leave you to face them alone. Trust me, Nathan insisted. I know these canyons. There's a way up the back wall that's not visible unless you know it's there. I'll lose them and circle back to meet you at Coyote Springs. Before she could argue further, they reached the fork. Nathan pulled up sharply, helping her transfer to Rusty's saddle. Ride hard, he instructed, pressing a quick kiss to her forehead. Don't stop until you reach the stage station. Wait for me there. With that, he slapped Rusty's flank, sending the gelding bolting down the right-hand path with Genevieve clinging to the saddle. She looked back once to see Nathan deliberately leaving obvious tracks down the left path before disappearing into the box canyon. Rusty seemed to understand the urgency, maintaining a fast pace even on the difficult terrain. Genevieve leaned low over his neck, using all her limited riding skills to stay mounted as they raced through the twisting canyon. Behind her, she heard shouts as the pursuers reached the fork. Would they split up or all follow Nathan? She couldn't tell, and dared not slow down to find out. The canyon gradually widened, opening onto a vast expanse of desert dotted with sagebrush and occasional stands of juniper. Genevieve kept Rusty moving at a steady lope, heading northeast as Nathan had instructed. According to him, Coyote Springs was about 10 miles from the canyon mouth, 2 hours ride at a measured pace that wouldn't exhaust the horse. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, Genevieve began to worry. What if Nathan had been caught? What if Howard or the sheriff had seen through the ruse and followed her instead? What if Nathan had been injured trying to escape up that hidden path? She forced herself to focus on the journey, to trust Nathan's knowledge of the land and his ability to evade pursuit. Rusty was tiring, his pace slowing despite her gentle urging. She allowed him to walk for stretches, scanning the horizon constantly for any sign of pursuers. By mid-afternoon, the heat was oppressive. Genevieve's water supply was running low, and Rusty's coat was dark with sweat. She began to fear she had somehow missed Coyote Springs or taken a wrong turn. Just as despair was setting in, she crested a small rise and saw it a cluster of buildings shimmering in the heat waves. A stage station, a small tavern, and what appeared to be a trading post. Coyote Springs. Relief flooded through her as she guided Rusty toward the station. As she approached, She scanned the hitching rails and corrals for Nathan's gray mare, but saw no sign of it. Her heart sank. Had he been caught after all? The station master, a grizzled older man with one good eye, watched curiously as she dismounted. "Help you, mister," he called, then blinked in surprise as he got a better look at her. "Begging your pardon, madam. Didn't realize you was a lady in them clothes." "It's quite all right," Genevieve assured him. "I'm waiting for someone, a tall man with dark hair, riding a gray mare." "Has he arrived yet?" The station master shook his head. "No, madam. Just you since the morning stage left. Next one's due tomorrow at noon, heading east to Flagstaff." Genevieve's worry increased. "May I water my horse? And perhaps get something to drink myself?" "Course." The man gestured to a water trough. "Tavern's open if you want something stronger than water. Though I reckon a lady like yourself might prefer to wait in the station house. Mrs. Henley keeps it decent in there." Grateful for the suggestion, Genevieve led Rusty to the water trough, then headed to the station house. Inside, a plump woman with iron gray hair looked up from her knitting. "Well now, what have we here?" she asked, taking in Genevieve's unusual attire. "You running from something, miss?" Too exhausted for pretense, Genevieve simply nodded. "My husband. He's violent. A friend is helping me reach Colorado, where I might obtain a divorce." Mrs. Henley's expression softened. "Ain't the first time I've heard such a tale. Sit yourself down, child. You look dead on your feet." Genevieve sank gratefully into a chair. "My friend should have been here by now. I'm worried." "Men can take care of themselves generally," Mrs. Henley said, pouring coffee into a tin cup and handing it to Genevieve. "If he knows the territory, he'll find his way." The coffee was strong and reviving. Genevieve sipped it slowly, watching the road from the station house window. Every passing minute increased her anxiety. The sun was beginning its descent toward the western horizon. Soon it would be evening, and if Nathan hadn't arrived by dark, she couldn't bear to complete the thought. Mrs. Henley provided a simple meal of beans, bacon, and cornbread, which Genevieve ate mechanically, her eyes never leaving the window for long. As the sun set, painting the desert in spectacular hues of orange and purple, the station master lit lanterns around the yard. "Stage room's yours if you want it," Mrs. Henley offered. "5 bits for the night, includes breakfast." Genevieve reached for the money concealed in her jacket. "Thank you. I'll take it, but I may need to leave quickly if my friend arrives." "Understood." Mrs. Henley showed her to a small, clean room with a narrow bed. "Rest if you can, dear." Worry never hastened a traveler's return. Though exhaustion pulled at her, Genevieve couldn't bring herself to sleep. She sat by the window, watching the moon rise over the desert, casting silver light on the empty road. Where was Nathan? Had Howard caught him? Was he injured somewhere in those unforgiving canyons? The questions circled endlessly in her mind as the hours crept by. Somewhere near midnight, her body finally surrendered to fatigue, and she dozed fitfully in the chair. A commotion outside woke her just before dawn. Horses' hooves, men's voices. For a terrifying moment, Genevieve thought Howard had found her. She crept to the window, peering out cautiously. In the gray pre-dawn light, she saw a group of riders dismounting at the station yard. Not Howard and the sheriff, but a freight wagon escort, rough-looking men with trailed dust coating their clothes and weapons prominently displayed. Disappointment and renewed worry flooded through her. Still no Nathan. She washed her face with the basin water provided, straightened her clothes as best she could, and steeled herself for another day of waiting. If Nathan didn't arrive by noon when the stage departed, what should she do? Continue to Flagstaff alone? Wait another day? Mrs. Henley was already up, preparing breakfast for the freight escort when Genevieve emerged from her room. "No sign of your friend yet," she said before Genevieve could ask. "But the day's just starting." Genevieve forced down some breakfast, then went to check on Rusty. The gelding seemed recovered from yesterday's hard ride, contentedly munching hay in the station corral. She brushed him down with a borrowed curry comb, finding comfort in the familiar task and the animal's steady presence. The morning stretched interminably. The freight wagon departed, leaving the station quiet once more. Genevieve paced, alternating between the station house porch and the corral, her eyes constantly scanning the horizon. Around 11, with the eastbound stage expected within the hour, she was standing by the corral when she spotted a cloud of dust to the west. A lone rider, coming fast. Her heart leapt, then immediately constricted with fear. One rider was it Nathan, or someone pursuing her? The station master had noticed too. Riding hard, he commented, squinting with his good eye. Might be trouble. Genevieve held her breath as the rider drew closer. The horse wasn't a dappled gray, but a sorrel, not Nathan's mare. Her hope began to fade until the rider came close enough to recognize. "Nathan," she cried, running toward him as he reined in the lathered sorrel. He dismounted quickly, catching her as she flung herself into his arms. "I'm sorry," he said, holding her tightly. "I had to take a longer route than planned." Lost the gray mare in the canyon, she stepped in a prairie dog hole. Had to walk until I found a ranch where I could trade my saddle for this old sorrel. Genevieve pulled back to look at him, noting the exhaustion in his face, the trail dust coating his clothes, a shallow cut on his cheek. "You're hurt." "It's nothing," he assured her. "A branch caught me as I was riding out. The important thing is, I lost them. Howard and the sheriff followed me into the box canyon, but they're not familiar with the hidden path. By the time they realized I'd escaped, I was miles away." Relief made Genevieve dizzy. "I was so worried. I thought." She couldn't finish the sentence. Nathan's hand gently cupped her cheek. "I promised I'd meet you here, didn't I? I keep my promises, Genevieve." The tenderness in his voice, the warmth in his eyes, overwhelmed her. Before she could think better of it, she rose on tiptoe and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was brief but electric, a moment of pure connection that left them both breathless. When they separated, Nathan looked at her with wonder and something deeper that made her heart race. "The stage will be here soon," he said softly, still holding her close. "We should get ready to leave." Reality crashed back. They were still fugitives, she was still a married woman, and Howard was still pursuing them. "Yes," she agreed reluctantly, stepping back. "We should." The station master, who had discreetly turned away during their reunion, called to them. "Stage will be here in 30 minutes or so. Best get your gear together if you're boarding." They gathered their few belongings and purchased tickets from the station master. Nathan insisted on paying for both, though Genevieve protested. "You can repay me when we reach Colorado," he said with a smile that made her blush. The stage arrived precisely at noon, a cloud of dust announcing its approach before the vehicle itself appeared. It was already carrying 4 passengers, a traveling salesman, an elderly couple returning to Flagstaff, and a young miner heading to the railroad to seek work further east. As they boarded, Nathan handed Rusty's reins to the station master. "Send word to the Circle S that their horse is here, would you? Samuel Stark will send someone to collect him." With a crack of the whip, the stage lurched forward, beginning the next leg of their journey. Genevieve watched Coyote Springs recede into the distance, grateful for the brief sanctuary it had provided, but eager to put more miles between them and Howard. The stage journey to Flagstaff was grueling 16 hours of jolting discomfort, choking dust, and brief stops to change horses at isolated stations. Genevieve dozed fitfully against Nathan's shoulder, his arm protectively around her despite the curious glances of their fellow passengers. They reached Flagstaff in the early morning hours, stiff and exhausted. The railroad station was already busy despite the hour, as a train to California was preparing to depart. "The eastbound train leaves at noon," Nathan said, consulting the schedule board. "We have time to find a hotel, get some proper rest, and a bath before continuing." Flagstaff was large enough that they felt relatively anonymous, though Nathan remained vigilant. They secured rooms at a modest hotel near the station, adjacent rooms with a connecting door, a compromise between propriety and security that drew only a slightly raised eyebrow from the clerk. After bathing and changing into the clean clothes Maggie had provided, Genevieve felt human again. She heard a soft knock on the connecting door. "It's unlocked," she called, smoothing her hair nervously. Nathan entered, freshly shaven and wearing a clean shirt. Without the trail dust and exhaustion, he looked younger, his blue eyes brighter against his tanned skin. "Feel better?" he asked. "Much," she admitted, "though I find myself missing the trousers for practicality's sake." He laughed. "They suited you, but I have to say, you look lovely in a proper dress as well." The compliment warmed her. "I've been thinking about our next steps," she said, gesturing for him to sit. "When we reach Denver, I'll need to consult a lawyer about divorce proceedings." The Starks mentioned that Colorado has more progressive laws, but I'm still concerned about Howard's potential interference. Nathan nodded thoughtfully. My brother knows people in Denver, reputable lawyers who might help. And his ranch is remote enough that Morrison would have difficulty finding you there. Your brother won't mind housing a fugitive wife. Genevieve asked Riley. Andrew has always had a soft spot for lost causes, Nathan replied with a smile. Besides, he's been trying to convince me to settle down near him for years. He'll consider this a promising development. The implication hung between them that this journey might lead to something more permanent between them once Genevieve was legally free. The thought sent a flutter through her stomach. I should warn you, Nathan continued. The ranch is nothing like the Starks' operation. It's smaller, more isolated. The nearest town is 15 miles away, and Denver is a full day's journey. Is there a need for a teacher? Genevieve asked practically. There's always need for education in remote areas, Nathan assured her. Several neighboring ranches have children who receive little formal schooling. Andrew's wife, Sarah, has been teaching their children herself, but she'd welcome assistance. The idea of building a new life in Colorado, far from Howard's reach, with meaningful work and perhaps in time a relationship with Nathan, filled Genevieve with cautious hope. But practicality tempered her optimism. Howard won't give up easily, she warned. He sees me as his property. His pride won't allow him to simply let me go, especially after I've humiliated him by leaving. We'll face that challenge when it comes, Nathan said confidently. For now, let's focus on reaching Colorado safely. The train journey east was a dramatic improvement over the stagecoach. Their second-class tickets afforded them reasonably comfortable seats, and the steady rhythm of the rails was soothing after days of tension and hard travel. As they crossed into Colorado territory, Genevieve felt a weight lifting. They weren't safe, yet Howard could still pursue them across territorial boundaries, but each mile increased the distance from her old life and brought her closer to potential freedom. Nathan pointed out landmarks as they traveled, telling stories of his years working on various ranches across the territory. His obvious love for this rugged land was infectious, and Genevieve found herself appreciating its wild beauty in a way she hadn't during her journey west as a new bride. They arrived in Denver on a crisp autumn morning, the city bustling with activity. Unlike Wyatt, with its single dusty main street, Denver was a proper city with brick buildings, paved streets, and an air of progress and permanence. We'll stay here tonight, Nathan decided as they disembarked. Send a telegram to Andrew and meet with a lawyer if possible. The stage to Silverdale, the town near my brother's ranch, leaves tomorrow morning. A room at a respectable hotel near the stage office provided a welcome respite after days of travel. Nathan left to send the telegram and make inquiries about lawyers while Genevieve rested, the reality of their situation finally catching up with her. She had fled across 2 territories with a man she'd known for barely 2 weeks, abandoning everything familiar in pursuit of freedom from a violent husband. The recklessness of it struck her suddenly, along with the enormity of what Nathan had risked on her behalf. When he returned, his expression was triumphant. I've secured an appointment with a lawyer tomorrow morning before the stage leaves. Richard Townsend, who specializes in divorce cases. And Andrew responded immediately. He and Sarah are expecting us. The lawyer's office was in a handsome brick building near the courthouse. Richard Townsend himself was a surprise younger than Genevieve expected, with spectacles and an earnest manner that put her at ease. Mrs. Morrison, he greeted her, Mr. Adler has explained your situation in general terms. I understand you're seeking a divorce from an abusive husband. Yes, Genevieve confirmed, removing her gloves and settling into the chair he offered. My husband, Howard Morrison, has been physically violent throughout our 3-year marriage, culminating in a public assault last week in Wyatt, Arizona territory. Were there witnesses to this assault? Townsend asked, taking notes. Several, Nathan interjected. Myself included. I intervened to prevent further injury. The lawyer nodded approvingly. That's helpful. Colorado law allows divorce on grounds of extreme cruelty, which includes physical abuse. The challenge will be establishing jurisdiction, as neither you nor your husband are Colorado residents. What if I establish residency here? Genevieve asked. That would be ideal. Our laws require 6 months residence before filing for divorce. During that time, You would need to avoid returning to Arizona territory, as your husband could claim abandonment and file his own divorce petition there under less favorable terms. The complexity of the legal situation was daunting, but Townsend's clear explanations helped Genevieve understand her options. By the end of the consultation, she had a plan: remain in Colorado for 6 months, then file for divorce with Townsend's assistance. In the meantime, he would prepare documentation of Howard's abuse, collecting affidavits from witnesses in Wyatt if possible. 6 months is a long time, Genevieve said as they left the office, heading for the stage depot. Howard could find me during that period. Andrew's ranch is remote, Nathan reminded her. And few people even in Denver will know you're there. We'll be careful. The stagecoach to Silverdale was smaller than the one that had carried them to Flagstaff, with room for only 6 passengers. Fortunately, they were the only travelers that day, giving them privacy for the 8-hour journey. The landscape changed as they traveled, the flat plains giving way to rolling hills and eventually the foothills of the mountains. Pine forests replaced the open grasslands, and the air grew cooler and fresher. It's beautiful, Genevieve said, gazing out the window at a vista of mountains rising majestically in the distance, their peaks already dusted with early snow. Wait until you see it in spring, Nathan replied. When the meadows are full of wildflowers and the aspen leaves are just opening, it's like nothing else on earth. The simple comment, the assumption that she would still be here in spring, that they would experience these seasons together, filled Genevieve with warmth. Despite the uncertainty ahead, despite Howard's potential pursuit, despite the legal complications of her situation, she was beginning to believe that a different future was possible. Silverdale proved to be little more than a cluster of buildings serving the surrounding ranches: a general store, a small church, a saloon, and the stage depot. A tall man with Nathan's jawline and the same blue eyes was waiting as they arrived, standing beside a sturdy wagon. "Nate," he called, striding forward to embrace his brother. "About time you came home for more than a flying visit." Nathan returned the embrace heartily. "Andrew, good to see you. This is Genevieve Morrison." Andrew's expression softened as he turned to her. "Mrs. Morrison, welcome to Colorado. Sarah's eager to meet you. She's been preparing the guest cabin all day." The warmth of his welcome eased Genevieve's nervousness. "Thank you for opening your home to me, especially given the circumstances." "Any friend of Nate's is welcome," Andrew said simply, "especially one he's willing to cross territories to protect." The journey to the ranch took another hour, the wagon following a winding road that climbed steadily into the foothills. As they crested a rise, the Adler ranch came into view: a substantial log house, a large barn, several outbuildings, and corrals for horses and cattle, all nestled in a sheltered valley with a creek running through it. "It's not as grand as the Circle S," Nathan said, "but it's home." "It's wonderful," Genevieve replied sincerely. After the dusty streets of Wyatt and the cramped house she'd shared with Howard, the Adler ranch seemed like paradise: open, free, surrounded by natural beauty. Sarah Adler met them at the door, a tall woman with auburn hair and a warm smile, a young boy of about 7 clinging to her skirts, and a baby on her hip. "Welcome," she called. "Come in. You must be exhausted from your journey." The interior of the ranch house was comfortable and welcoming, with handmade furniture, colorful quilts, and the unmistakable aroma of fresh bread. 2 more children, girls of about 10 and 5, peeked shyly from the kitchen doorway. "Mrs. Morrison, these are our children," Sarah said. "Emma, Lucy, Michael, and baby James. Children, this is Mrs. Morrison, who may be teaching you and the neighboring children if all goes well." The idea of teaching again, of having meaningful work that utilized her skills, filled Genevieve with joy. "I'd be delighted to teach them," she said, smiling at the curious children. "And please, call me Genevieve." After a hearty meal and getting acquainted with the family, Andrew drove them to the guest cabin, a small but sturdy structure about 100 yards from the main house. "It's not fancy," he apologized, "but it's private and comfortable." "It's perfect," Genevieve assured him, taking in the simple room with its iron bed, small table and chairs, pot-bellied stove, and shelf of books. Once Andrew had left, promising to return with extra blankets before dark, Nathan turned to Genevieve. "I'll be staying in the bunkhouse with the ranch hands," he explained. "I didn't want to presume." The consideration in his tone touched her. Despite their growing closeness, despite the kiss they'd shared at Coyote Springs, Nathan was careful to maintain propriety, to give her space to determine the nature of their relationship. "Thank you," she said softly. "For everything, Nathan. I don't know how I'll ever repay your kindness." He stepped closer, his expression serious. "You don't owe me anything, Genevieve. I helped you because it was right, because no one helped Beth when she needed it. And I brought you here because—" He hesitated, then continued with quiet intensity. "Because in the short time I've known you, I've come to care for you deeply." The admission hung between them, honest and undemanding. Genevieve's heart raced. "I care for you too," she admitted. "More than I should, given my situation." Nathan took her hand gently. "We have time. 6 months for your residency requirement. Time for you to heal, to be sure of what you want. I'll wait, Genevieve, however long it takes." His patience, his understanding of her need for certainty after years with Howard, only deepened her feelings for him. Standing on tiptoe, she kissed him softly, a promise, a beginning. The next 6 months unfolded with a peaceful rhythm unlike anything Genevieve had experienced in years. She established a small school in an unused storage building on the Adler ranch, teaching the 4 Adler children and 8 more from neighboring ranches. The work was fulfilling, challenging in the best ways, reminding her of the passionate teacher she'd been before her marriage. Nathan worked alongside his brother, running the ranch operations. He was a frequent visitor to Genevieve's cabin in the evenings, bringing firewood, books from Denver, or simply his company. Their relationship deepened gradually, built on mutual respect and growing affection rather than the whirlwind romance that had led to her disastrous marriage to Howard. News from Arizona reached them occasionally through carefully routed letters from the Starks. Howard had indeed filed abandonment charges and was seeking to have Genevieve declared legally incompetent, claiming she had been seduced away from her duties by Nathan. Sheriff Preston, however, had been less cooperative than Howard expected, refusing to pursue the case beyond territorial boundaries. The sheriff mentioned witnesses coming forward, Samuel Stark wrote in one letter. Apparently, Mrs. Hollister from the millinery shop and Tom Baker from the telegraph office both provided statements about Howard's public violence toward you. The tide of town opinion has shifted somewhat. This news brought Genevieve both relief and a strange sadness. After years of feeling isolated in her suffering, learning that others had noticed but remained silent until she fled was bittersweet. Still, the statements would strengthen her divorce case when the time came. Winter settled over the Colorado foothills, transforming the landscape into a wonderland of pristine snow and ice-laden pines. Genevieve, who had never experienced such a winter, was enchanted by its beauty and the cozy intimacy it created as families gathered around hearths and shared stories on long evenings. Nathan taught her to snowshoe, to identify animal tracks in the snow, to appreciate the special silence of a forest in winter. Their excursions often ended at her cabin, where they would sit before the fire, talking for hours about books, dreams, the future. It was during one such evening in February that Nathan finally spoke of what had been growing between them for months. "Genevieve," he said, taking her hands as they sat before the crackling fire, "these past months have been the happiest of my life. Being with you, seeing you bloom away from Howard's shadow, watching you teach those children with such passion, it's all confirmed what I began to feel the moment I met you." Her heart quickened. "And what is that, Nathan?" "That you're the woman I want to spend my life with." His blue eyes held her steadily. "I know your divorce isn't finalized yet. I know there are still hurdles ahead. But when the time is right, if you feel as I do, I want to marry you." Tears sprang to Genevieve's eyes, not tears of sorrow or fear, as she'd so often shed with Howard, but tears of joy. "I do feel as you do," she whispered. "I love you, Nathan. I think I began to love you that first day in Wyatt, when you stood between me and Howard's fist." "I love you, Genevieve," he replied, drawing her into his arms. "And I promise you this, I will never raise a hand to you in anger. I will never try to diminish your spirit or control your choices. I want a partnership, not ownership." The contrast with Howard's possessive demands could not have been starker. In Nathan's love, Genevieve found not confinement, but freedom, the space to be herself, to grow, to pursue her passion for teaching while being cherished for exactly who she was. Yes, she said simply. When I'm free, I will marry you. Spring arrived with a riot of wildflowers across the mountain meadows, just as Nathan had promised. In April, Richard Townsend sent word that Genevieve's residency requirement had been met and her divorce petition could be filed. Morrison will be notified, he warned in his letter. He has the right to contest the divorce, though with the witness statements we've collected, his chances of success are slim. Still, be prepared for potential retaliation. The warning cast a shadow over their happiness. Howard won't accept this easily, Genevieve told Nathan as they rode together through a meadow carpeted with blue columbines and scarlet paintbrush. His pride won't allow it. We'll be vigilant, Nathan assured her. Andrew has alerted the neighbors. No stranger will approach the ranch unnoticed. Despite these precautions, Genevieve couldn't shake her unease. She knew Howard, his determination, his vindictiveness, his refusal to lose what he considered his property. The legal proceedings moved forward, with Townsend filing the petition and Howard being officially notified in Wyatt. His response came swiftly, not through legal channels, but in the form of a terse note delivered to the Silverdale General Store, addressed to Mrs. Howard Morrison, care of Adler Ranch. I know where you are, the note read. No court can dissolve what God has joined. You are my wife until death. Remember your vows. The implicit threat sent a chill through Genevieve. Nathan wanted to take her to Denver, where she might be safer, but she refused to be driven from the home and community she had built. I won't let him intimidate me anymore, she declared. This is my life now, and I won't abandon it out of fear. May brought the scheduled court hearing for the divorce petition. Genevieve and Nathan traveled to Denver, accompanied by Andrew as additional protection. Richard Townsend met them at the hotel, optimistic about their chances. The judge assigned to your case is known for his progressive views on marriage, he explained. And the evidence of cruelty is substantial. Morrison has filed objections, but they're primarily based on religious grounds rather than legal ones. The hearing itself was brief but intense. Genevieve testified about Howard's violence, supported by written statements from witnesses in Wyatt. Howard was not present, having sent a Denver lawyer to represent his interests. This lawyer argued strenuously that Genevieve had abandoned her marital duties and been unduly influenced by Nathan, but the judge seemed unimpressed by these claims. I will review the evidence and render my decision within the week, the judge announced, closing the hearing. They remained in Denver, anxiously awaiting the verdict. Nathan rarely left Genevieve's side, concerned about Howard potentially arriving in the city to confront her. The hotel staff were alerted to watch for a man matching Howard's description. On the third day, as they were returning from dinner at a nearby restaurant, Nathan tensed suddenly, his hand moving protectively to Genevieve's arm. What is it? She asked, alarmed by his expression. That man across the street, Nathan murmured. He's been following us since we left the restaurant. Genevieve looked discreetly in the direction Nathan indicated. A stocky figure stood in the shadow of a building, watching them with unmistakable interest. Even at this distance, she recognized the set of those shoulders, the stance Howard. It's him, she whispered, fear clutching at her heart. What do we do? Keep walking, Nathan instructed calmly. We're almost to the hotel. Once inside, I'll alert the desk clerk to fetch the police. They continued toward the hotel, maintaining a steady pace despite Genevieve's impulse to run. Howard followed, keeping to the opposite side of the street, but making no attempt to hide his presence. It was as if he wanted them to know he was there, a deliberate intimidation. Just as they reached the hotel entrance, Howard crossed the street, moving directly toward them. Genevieve, he called, his voice carrying in the evening air. We need to talk. Nathan positioned himself between Genevieve and Howard. There's nothing to discuss, Morrison. The court will make its decision. Howard's face was flushed with anger, his eyes glittering with a dangerous light Genevieve knew all too well. This isn't about the court, he snarled. It's about my wife's betrayal. Her sin. Go inside, Nathan told Genevieve quietly. Get the clerk to call for help. She hesitated, unwilling to leave Nathan alone with Howard. I'm not leaving you, please, Nathan insisted. I'll be right behind you. Reluctantly, Genevieve backed toward the hotel door, keeping her eyes on the two men. Howard's attention was fixed on Nathan, his expression twisted with hatred. You stole what was mine, Howard accused. Turned her against me. Made a whore of my wife. Nathan remained calm in the face of Howard's vitriol. Mrs. Morrison made her own choice to leave a man who abused her. The only thing I did was offer safety when you raised your fist to her in public. Howard's hand moved to his coat, and Genevieve saw with horror that he was reaching for a concealed weapon. Nathan, she screamed in warning. Nathan reacted instantly, lunging forward to grab Howard's wrist just as he drew a small revolver. The two men struggled, Howard's face contorted with rage as he tried to aim the weapon at Nathan. Genevieve ran back toward them, desperate to help somehow, just as the hotel doorman and a passing policeman raced to intervene. In the confusion, the gun discharged with a deafening crack. For a terrible moment, Genevieve couldn't tell who had been hit. Both men stumbled. Then Howard collapsed to the sidewalk, blood spreading across his shirt from a wound in his chest. The gun clattered to the pavement beside him. He's been shot, the policeman called, kneeling beside Howard. Fetch a doctor, quickly. Nathan backed away, his face pale with shock. Genevieve rushed to his side. Are you hurt? She asked frantically, searching him for injuries. No, he assured her, though his voice shook. The gun turned during the struggle. It discharged into his own chest. More policemen arrived, followed by a doctor who examined Howard on the sidewalk. His expression was grim as he looked up at the gathered crowd. This man is dead, he announced. Shot through the heart. The next hours passed in a blur of police questions, statements, and shock. Nathan explained repeatedly how he had acted to prevent Howard from shooting him, how the gun had turned in the struggle. Witnesses, including the hotel doorman and the first responding officer, corroborated his account. By dawn, the police captain had concluded his investigation. Self-defense, clear as day, he told Nathan. Morrison pulled the weapon with clear intent to harm. You acted to protect yourself and Mrs. Morrison. No charges will be filed. Genevieve sat numbly beside Nathan in the hotel lobby, the reality of Howard's death still not fully registered. Her husband of 3 years, the man she had once loved and then feared, was gone. The threat he represented was over, but not in the way she had expected or wanted. I never wanted this, Nathan said quietly, his face haggard with the strain of the night's events. I only wanted to keep you safe. I know, Genevieve replied, taking his hand. This isn't your fault, Nathan. Howard made his choice when he came here with a gun. Richard Townsend arrived later that morning, having heard about the incident. The judge has been informed of these developments, he told them. Given the circumstances, he's expedited his decision on your divorce petition. Is that still necessary? Genevieve asked. With Howard gone. Legally, yes, Townsend explained. To clarify your status and rights, especially regarding any property or assets from the marriage. But the judge has granted the divorce, effective immediately. You are legally free, Mrs. Morrison, or should I say, Miss Lansing? The return to her maiden name felt right a reclaiming of herself, of the woman she had been before Howard and could be again. Yes, she said, straightening her shoulders. Genevieve Lansing. Howard was buried in Denver, with Genevieve as his only mourner. It was a brief, somber ceremony. Despite everything he had done, despite the fear and pain he had caused her, she felt a complex mix of emotions as the simple casket was lowered into the ground, relief that the threat was over, sadness for the man he might have been, regret that their marriage had ended in such tragedy. Nathan stood at a distance, respecting her need for this final closure. When the service concluded, he joined her, offering his arm for the walk back to their waiting wagon. Are you all right? He asked gently. I will be, she replied. It feels strange being free, but it's such a cost. You deserved freedom without this price, Nathan said. Without the fear, the flight across territories, the violence at the end. I'm sorry it came to this. I'm not sorry for the journey, Genevieve said, looking up at him. It brought me to you, to the Adlers, to a life I never imagined possible. I'm only sorry Howard couldn't find peace in letting go. They returned to the ranch the following day. The familiar sight of the valley, the log house, the small cabin that had become her home over the past months, brought a sense of rightness, of belonging. This was where she was meant to be. The school children welcomed her back enthusiastically, and the routine of teaching helped ground her in the aftermath of Denver's drama. Nathan resumed his work on the ranch, though he was quieter than usual, processing the events that had transpired. A week after their return, on a perfect June evening with the mountains bathed in golden light, Nathan came to her cabin with a small box in his hand. "I've been waiting for the right moment," he said, taking her hands as they stood on the porch overlooking the valley. "After everything that happened in Denver, I wanted to give you time, space to be sure." "I am sure," Genevieve said softly. "I've never been more certain of anything." Nathan knelt before her, opening the box to reveal a simple but beautiful ring, a silver band set with a small sapphire. "This was my mother's," he explained. "My father gave it to me before he died, hoping I'd find someone to share my life with someday." "It's beautiful," Genevieve whispered, tears blurring her vision. "Genevieve Lansing," Nathan said, his voice steady and sure. "Will you marry me? Will you build a life here with me? Teach our children and others? Grow old with me in these mountains?" "Yes," she answered without hesitation. "With all my heart, yes." The ring slid onto her finger, a perfect fit, as if it had been made for her all along. Nathan rose and pulled her into his arms, sealing their engagement with a kiss that promised a lifetime of love, respect, and partnership. They were married in July, in the small church in Silverdale with the Adler family and their friends from neighboring ranches in attendance. Genevieve wore a gown of pale blue silk that Sarah had helped her make, with wildflowers in her hair instead of a veil. Nathan, in a new suit, watched her walk down the aisle with an expression of such love and wonder that it brought tears to the eyes of even the most stoic ranchers present. Their vows were simple but profound promises of love, fidelity, mutual respect, and support through whatever life might bring. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, the cheer that went up from the congregation echoed against the mountains, as if the land itself was blessing their union. The celebration continued at the Adler Ranch, with tables set up under the trees, lanterns hanging from branches, and music provided by local ranchers with fiddles and guitars. Genevieve danced with her new husband until the stars came out, feeling a joy so complete it seemed almost unreal after the darkness of her past. Later that night, as they walked hand in hand to the cabin that would be their home until they built their own house nearby, Nathan paused to look up at the star-filled sky. "Do you remember that first night at the Circle S?" he asked, "when you said the sky made your problems seem smaller?" Genevieve nodded, following his gaze to the vast canopy of stars. "I do. I feel that way now," he admitted. "Like all the fear and pain that brought us together has diminished beneath something larger and more important, this love we've found." "It doesn't erase the past," Genevieve said thoughtfully, "but it gives it meaning. Everything that happened, even the worst parts, led us here, to this moment, to each other." Nathan drew her close, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret that journey." "I already don't," she assured him, rising on tiptoe to meet his lips with hers. "The journey brought me home." 5 years later, Genevieve stood on the porch of the house she and Nathan had built overlooking the valley, watching as he taught their 3-year-old son, Thomas, to ride his first pony. Their infant daughter, Elizabeth, named for Nathan's sister, slept peacefully in a cradle beside her, dark lashes fanned against rosy cheeks. The school she had established had grown, now housed in a proper schoolhouse built by the community halfway between the Adler Ranch and Silverdale. 24 children attended, with Genevieve teaching the older students while a young woman from Denver, whom Genevieve had trained, taught the younger ones. Nathan and Andrew had expanded their ranching operation, breeding horses as well as cattle, with a reputation for quality that brought buyers from as far as California. The Adler name had become respected throughout Colorado, and Nathan's quiet integrity had earned him a position on the territorial council. As Genevieve watched her husband lift their laughing son from the pony and swing him high into the air, she felt a contentment so deep it brought tears to her eyes. From the frightened, isolated woman trapped in Howard Morrison's home to this, a beloved wife, respected teacher, cherished mother, with a voice in her community and the freedom to use it. Nathan glanced up, catching her eye across the yard. His smile, still capable of making her heart skip after 5 years of marriage, was full of love and promise. He said something to Thomas, then set the boy down to play with his cousin Emma's children while he crossed to join Genevieve on the porch. "What are you thinking about?" Looking so serious, he asked, sliding an arm around her waist. How fortunate I am, she replied, leaning into his embrace. How different life might have been if you hadn't stopped that fist outside the general store in Wyatt. Nathan brushed a kiss against her temple. I think we would have found each other somehow, somewhere. Some things are meant to be. Genevieve smiled, believing him. From violence had come peace. From fear had come security. From a desperate flight across the territories had come this home, this family, this love that grew stronger with each passing day. As the sun began to set behind the mountains, painting the valley in gold and crimson just as it had that first evening in Wyatt, Genevieve whispered a silent prayer of gratitude. For the cowboy who had stopped a fist and offered safety. For the courage to reach for freedom. For this life that had risen, beautiful and unexpected, from the ashes of the old. Nathan squeezed her hand, as if hearing her thoughts. Come inside, he said softly. The children are tired, and the night is ours. Hand in hand, they gathered their children and entered their home, closing the door on the gathering dusk. Outside, the mountains stood sentinel, unchanging witnesses to their journey from strangers to beloved companions, from fear to safety, from isolation to family. And within those protective walls, their love continued to grow, as vast and enduring as the Colorado sky above them.